Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance and welcome to the regular meeting of the Trinity County Planning Commission. It is November 8, 2018. Before we proceed with the main item on hand, we're going to receive public comment. Members of the public may address the Planning Commission concerning matters within their own jurisdiction or district which are not listed on tonight's agenda, and to request that the matter be agendized for a future meeting. No action may be taken on these matters at this meeting. Anyone wishing to address the Planning Commission concerning not the item on tonight's agenda, please come forward, state your name for the record. Being that there's not, we will close public comment. Moving on to agenda item number 3, minutes. There are none. Old business, none. New business, agenda item number 4, appeal of planning director's decision upholding works decision approving modification of aesthetics for Mountain Community Health District Clinic expansion. Steph?
Good evening, Commissioners. And can everybody hear me? Okay. A public notice was sent for this item that includes an appeal of the planning director's decision acknowledging that the Weaverville Architectural Review Committee made a decision regarding the aesthetic impacts of the proposed clinic expansion on Easter Avenue. And we would like to keep the discussion tonight really focused on that appeal specifically. There are a lot of other overlapping issues that will come up, but that is what was publicly noticed. We have received public comments regarding this. We received 2 in favor of the planning director's decision, and we received 3 in favor of the appellant position. We also received, in the public comments, we also received a petition signed by 39 people requesting that the Planning Commission have a meeting in the future to discuss the modulars versus the stick-builts that were originally proposed for this project. But again, that is, I included them in an effort to be transparent, but that's not what we're discussing this evening. Although the director said publicly that the item would go to the Planning Commission, he went back and looked at the file, reviewed it more carefully, and decided that this was not a substantial deviation from the original use permit, the modular unit going in, and that there was a mitigation measure regarding impacts to aesthetics that was included in the use permit that was approved that would deal with what the difference was in putting the modular unit in instead of using a stick built. The Weaverville Architectural Review Committee did provide input regarding siding, roofing, color. They looked at several different options for mitigating impacts that would allow the proposed building to fit in with the historic setting of the Taylor Street neighborhood. And the planning director looked at those decisions and said, okay, yep, I accept those. I think that those are consistent with the use permit. According to the zoning ordinance, you may revoke or modify a use permit as you see. It's at your discretion if you choose to do that. Typically speaking, now in our staff reports, the Planning Commission staff reports, we don't include alternatives. We have a staff recommendation, but not alternatives. I'd like to give you what your alternatives are. These don't necessarily have to be in a box, but you could uphold the planning director's decision. You could uphold the appellant's position and direct the staff to either modify or revoke the use permit. When this item was approved, there were a few revisions that were made, and I did copy those from the vote that the Planning Commission made in July of 2016, in which the Department of Transportation had initially included a condition to require sidewalk, curb, and gutter along Taylor Street that would go down the north end of Court Street, and that was removed. denying the request for 4 on-street parking spaces along Taylor Street was removed, and requiring the widening of Garden Gulch Road parking lot entrance/exit and a corresponding narrowing of the Taylor Street driveway to discourage traffic accessing Taylor Street from the clinic parking lot. So there were several revisions that were made, and we do have a copy of what they are here if you'd like to see those. But once again, we're really focused on the Weaverville Architectural Review Committee has been positioned to be able to deal with any impacts associated with aesthetics. The planning director, after looking at how this project was going to be proposed, decided that those were the likely impacts and that there was something in the use permit, a mitigation measure that would allow us to mitigate them. So do you have any questions?
I guess the most obvious question is the Architectural Review Committee process is not yet complete. And so it seems like some of this is premature. I sit on the Architectural Review Committee, and at a meeting on the 24th of September, I made a motion to, it was basically a concept of trying to address roof line issues and mitigating some of the aesthetic changes. Since then, I've heard, not through the planning department, but through the grapevine, that for structural reasons, that motion that was approved by the Architectural Review Committee to modify the roof lines and try to make it more attractive building could not be implemented. And so, essentially, I know that a group has been meeting separately, trying to come up with alternatives beyond what the Architectural Review Committee approved, but that hasn't come back before the Architectural Review Committee yet. And so the process of the Architectural Review Committee is not complete. And so I'm not sure that we can really address this issue of aesthetics until the Architectural Review Committee has finished their process. So I guess that's the question for you and for council. Aren't we premature? I mean, there's no final approval of the project by the Architectural Review Committee. We presented a concept, and all we know is that that's not moving forward. And there might be other concepts, but those haven't been presented to the committee yet. So I guess I'm wondering why we're here even.
Somebody does have the ability to appeal the planning director's decision at any time.
Okay, that's fine.
And I should let you know, the consequences, again, we don't give you alternatives generally because we don't want to put you into, you can come up with a variety of different alternatives. Of the alternatives that I gave you, if you do decide to uphold the planning director's decision, the appellant has the ability to then appeal to the Board of Supervisors from this decision at the Planning Commission level. And then if you uphold the appellant's position, the applicant, in this case, Mountain Community Healthcare District, has the ability to appeal to the Board of Supervisors, or if you choose to send the use permit back for an amendment or modification, they could follow the use permit back. So those are a few options and consequences.
So then, if I may, could you clarify what is the decision that we're being asked to review? If the architecture committee has not in fact rendered an opinion, what is it that the director is upholding that we have under appeal?
When the Architectural Review Committee looked at options, particularly regarding roofing, and here's where it is difficult because it's iterative, and yet somebody can step in and appeal the planning director's decision at any time. And so, is there that potential for getting into a bit of an appeal purgatory? We don't want to do that. We want to establish that the planning director is recognizing the WARC's authority in this position. It's not within the historic district, but because the Weaverville Architectural Review Committee was designated in the use permit as being able to be the kind of guiding body or the body that somebody could go to for input, then that's how they have that role in this case. It's a little unusual because it's not where they normally operate.
I'm not sure you answered my question. Let me try again.
Sorry about that.
No, I'm sure I wasn't clear.
I guess what we're doing, we're looking at wanting to make sure that the Weaverville Architectural Review Committee's decisions regarding aesthetics to deal with this project are acceptable to the planning director,
Even though those recommendations are still in play.
and it's still in play.
So it sounds like we're being asked to uphold the director's decision that when the architecture committee comes up with a solution, he'll accept it, presumably, and that we're affirming that in advance. What am I going wrong?
Well, it's the first I've heard tonight that the provisions set out by the architectural committee were not feasible or were not going to be implemented. So that issue is a little bit of a question, as Commissioner Matthews stated, of whether we're in a position to make a determination on whether upholding those is appropriate if they're still in flux. The other issue, though, is that the mitigation in the use permit was for them to seek the advice of the architectural committee and essentially have input as to those mitigations. And so one of the questions tonight would be whether you want the use permit to stay as it is, giving that committee the authority and input and allowing the planning director to accept their input as the mitigation for that use permit.
I'm trying hard not to be difficult, which could be out of character, I understand. So that sounds like we're reaffirming our own condition in the use permit, delegating to the architectural review committee, whom I thought we heard testimony is still meeting and considering this issue. So we'd be reaffirming our delegation to the architecture committee. When they, if it's true, they have not yet made their final recommendation to the project, then when they do that, and then if the director upholds it, then an appeal of his decision would be an appropriate thing to do. Is that the sequence, or I'm still trying to figure out where I'm going wrong here?
Well, yeah, I think some of the confusion came with the information that those recommendations by the architectural committee can't be implemented. Like I said, that's not a part of the staff report. That's not a part of the information that I had until just recently. So that wouldn't prevent an amendment to the conditional use permit based on what the appellant's position is, but it would probably make it somewhat difficult to decide whether you're upholding what the mitigation plan that has come out of the architectural committee would be.
So has a plan come out of the architectural committee?
I would say it was a concept.
But, so, are you meeting again to continue on this discussion?
It hasn't been scheduled. So, I mean, I don't see how we can be put in that position of making aesthetic recommendations without having a final proposal
Okay.
from the district.
I mean, I'm still confused about the subject, but I'll be quiet for a moment.
In addition, from what I understood and from what was noticed before the meeting, apparently the minutes for your meetings have not been approved either. Therefore, they cannot become public information, because I believe that is a substantial piece of this, to be able to review those aesthetic determinations or recommendations. So at the same time, we're waiting to be able to review those minutes as well and see what those recommendations are. So that, again, just one piece that's missing. So Commissioners, any other questions or clarifications from staff or council? Being that there's not, we will, this item does carry a public hearing. We're open public hearing. I do want to make note that building codes, many letters that were submitted for our review and consideration concern items of building codes, occupancy, different ratings of sorts. I just want to state that building codes are dictated by state and county law and are not under the preview of tonight's planning commission meeting. So with that said, let's proceed with public comment. I do want to make one last comment concerning public comment. We have been traditionally holding a time limit of 3 minutes for each public comment. Mrs. Sue Corrigan, since she is the appellant, will be allowed as much time as needed. Please, consider be brief as possible, since she is the appellant. And in the case that this might go on to litigation, she needs to make note of her concerns. So with that said, we're going to open public comment. Anyone wishing to address the commission regarding this item, please come forward and state your name for the record.
Marlene Elliott. I just wonder, I'm baffled by the fact that if the Architectural Review Committee has not approved the plan, why are they continuing construction? Shouldn't they be red tagged at this point to say stop, till we figure this out, and then you can continue? I mean, that's what would happen at any other residential property in this county, and it seems like they're just either finding some kind of loophole or steamrolling our government, our departments here by just going ahead and doing whatever they want to do. And if they planned on something that wasn't financially feasible, then they have to redesign it, that it is feasible and pleasing and goes with our community. And I've seen this project and it's really ugly. So just want to state that I'm in favor of red tagging this job until it is approved by everyone. The Planning Commission, the department, your department, and the Architectural Review Committee, and the neighbors who have to live with this monster in their backyard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Elliott. No, I said thank you.
So I'm Chris Kennedy. I live directly across from the project. Several years back, I had the same sentiment. I was putting a retaining wall in my backyard, and somebody noticed it, and I was red tagged. I had to go down and get all my paperwork in order and stuff before I finished my retaining wall, which, by the way, is beautiful. So I'm looking out right now, and I noticed today when I got home that all 9 air conditioners are hooked up, and I'm a little concerned about what this, well, it looks like a wall built for housing air conditioners, and I'm a little worried about what it's going to sound like when they fire them up. So I'm not only concerned about how it looks, but I'm concerned about how it's going to affect the people that live in the area as far as maybe some noise problems. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
I'm Kelly Corrigan. I'm reading this letter from, excuse me. I'm reading this letter from Terry Borden. Hello, my name is Terry Borden. My family has been residents of Taylor Street for over 100 years and of Trinity County for over 150 years. I grew up knowing Weaverville as a beautiful mountain community with tree-lined streets, and many beautiful homes, including Taylor Street. Until recently, Taylor Street had retained this atmosphere. A few years ago, Trinity Hospital and its board of directors came up with a grand plan to build a mega clinic on the property next to the hospital on Taylor Street. Their plan was flawed from the beginning. A proposal was made that was so big there was no way it could be carried out. But with the grand wisdom of the Board of Supervisors, they were all allowed to continue with this project. This project and all its grandiose plans were to become the centerpiece of Taylor Street. But there was a problem with the cost. A little problem, but a big problem. It was $2 million over estimated cost. So now the hospital board has come up with a plan to put in modulars to solve their problem. These modulars, as unsightly as they look, and not fitting into this historical look of the neighborhood, has brought disgust to me and my family. This is what the residents of Taylor Street will have to look at every day. Unfortunately, this plan was given the go-ahead by the planning department with no hearing, so work continued. Work continued on the project that entirely different from the original project. My question for the planning department is that if I submit plans to the planning department, have them approved, and then later, down the line, decided to change them, would I have to go back to the planning department? I would think so, since the hospital was allowed to act in this way. So I would think now that everyone in Trinity County would have a pass to do whatever they wanted when it came to building. Hopefully the planning department, the planning commission, has the wisdom to make Trinity Hospital start over with their plans, since there are nowhere near the original plans. If not, the planning department is going to have to deal with builders saying if the hospital doesn't have to do it, they don't have to either. I urge the planning department to make the hospital follow the rules. It is not the residents of Taylor Street at fault that the clinic plans have been so messed up. That message goes to the hospital board. The planning department needs to do the right thing and keep these unsightly neighborhoods off our street. Sincerely, Terry Borden, 41 Taylor Street.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is John Hayward. I'm the tribal chair for the Naroma tribe of Trinity County. I've just taken over the leadership in September, and my concern about your project is as I look through my files the last couple of days, and I find no letter from the county stating that there was going to be any groundbreaking in this project. We're very concerned about that because of the archaeological things that have been found in Trinity County and the stuff that we have lost. And I didn't also look for a letter from an archaeologist that survey that we usually get, stating whether there has been any artifacts or anything of significant value, historical value, found on these properties. I wasn't aware that there was going to be any groundbreaking on this project. So we're really concerned about this because we would have requested a monitor on this project. I just went through a fight with Cal Fire, Caltrans, and a lot of other projects, the Park Service down here with these Delta Fire and Car Fire with monitors. I was required to get them hazmat training, which is 40 hours, which sets me back and really hurt me bad there because by the time I got the 40 hours and my monitors through this training, it was too late to do any monitoring because they'd already went through our sites in this country. So you can see my concern about this. Trinity County has a lot of artifacts in this county that have been turning up in the last few years because of the large flood zones that we've had in the past. It's uncovered some of this stuff and washed them out now. On the restoration down on the river, we're losing artifacts down there because we haven't been notified on, because we're not federally recognized. But with the county, we have an MOU stating that we are supposed to get a letter from the archaeological people and a letter from the county stating if there's any groundbreaking so that we can make a decision of whether we need a monitor on it. And I've been pretty fair on that. I don't require monitors on there. If there's nothing on there, I'm not gonna hold anybody up on a project. So, our main concern is that we're really not happy, I guess you could say, with the groundbreaking without proper notification to us. Thank you.
Mr. Hayward. We would, the commission would like to hear from the panel,
Yes.
if you would, please.
All right, let's put some glasses on here. Okay, well, good evening. My name is Susan Van Meter Corrigan. I would like to thank you for hearing our appeal today. I would like to start by saying we are not against better medical services for Trinity County. Since we live next door to the hospital, we pay attention and are aware of our surroundings. I am one of the last descendants of my local ancestors and feel we have to stand up for what is right to preserve their history and ours. We are appalled by the lack of due process that has happened with MCHD's clinic expansion. We started with our objections to the change in the conditional use permit as soon as we heard wind of the hospital's desire to completely change the original project from a stick build to a modular. Upon learning of this switch, we started communications with the planning department, only to be told they knew nothing yet and would look into the matter. Months later, we are scratching our heads as to how we got here today. We are offended that we have not had an opportunity to voice our concerns and wish to receive the respect of being given that opportunity. 2 years ago, we attended the commission meeting objecting to MCHD's application to expand the clinic on Taylor Street. I'm sure you all reread the minutes from those meetings. Some of you may not know that we also appealed it to the supervisors after your ruling to allow their conditional use permit. I see the minutes from that meeting are not in your packet. You may have also reread that there were many conditions to the project, as it was in a neighborhood that is an extension of our downtown historic district. At that time, all involved recognized the historic value and congestion of the neighborhood. So many items were added as to mitigation measures that would be followed. The work committee, which is made up of volunteers, were assigned to mitigate the aesthetics of the stick build to assure that it would, as best as possible, fit into the historic neighborhood. That was the original project. As you can imagine, we were shocked to see that the matter was put in the hands of volunteers, not paid officials hired to make sure due process was met. I will try to explain examples of that. 1, we started in June to find out if the meeting was going to be held on the matter. 2, it has been stated that MCHD had discussed the matter with the supervisors and planning department, and Mr. Rogers didn't need to present renderings to the work committee. But no votes were taken during those backdoor meetings. Upon discussing this matter with my supervisor, I was told she knew nothing about the matter and not had discussions with MCHD, nor did Bobby Chadwick. We did not poll the other supervisors. 3, Mr. Rogers also stated at the September 12th meeting that he thought it was on the agenda for the Planning Commission of September 27th, but staff reported there was not enough time for the notice. Upon reading the minutes from the previous work meeting on the 12th, an argument ensued in which Aaron expresses that because this building is approved by the building department as a legal structure, the committee cannot hold up its arrival and it's illegal for them to do so. Committee members and Leslie Husband disagreed with this statement. Leslie explains the difference between building permits and conditional use permits. This argument is another example of Mr. Rogers' threatening and bullying way of doing business. This meeting continued and the committee moved on to the task at hand, which was to discuss the aesthetics. At that time, there were still no engineered plans of the modules, so deciding on roof mitigation was hard pressed, as they did not know what the structural capacity of the modular units would be. 4, the art committee decided on siding mitigation, but had to come back for a final on the roofing design. Bob Morris states that this agreement to vote on final roofing design after modules are built relies on trust between WARC and MCHD. Trust. Wow. How can that happen when behind-door meetings are held, no public meetings are held, and zero accountability is applied to Mr. Tippett
applied by Mr. Tippett as to engineered plans and a full review by elected and public employees is performed. There is no way to trust individuals that are doing what they want, ignoring plans and procedures we must all follow when we build. 5. On September 24th, another work meeting was held in the parking lot, a meeting we were finally notified on time so we could attend. It was at that meeting that we witnessed a committee that was under pressure to come up with aesthetic mitigations that would try to fit this project into this historical area. We observed that each member of the work committee was uncomfortable meeting on the matter that was not up to them. They were assigned to this project 2 years ago because it was identified as a sensitive area and were assigned to the project owing to help fit the original building into the neighborhood. So how the heck did they become the deciding body to approve this completely different structure? Not only did they all feel it was not okay, but agreed that it was like putting lipstick on a pig. Their job was only to decide what color lipstick was okay, not to approve the project. It is convenient that the work committee did not have a rendering of the modular that showed the heating and air conditioning units that are now on Taylor Street. How could they mitigate that issue without a proper rendering? The only rendering that was given to them was this. And no time was there one picture of the air conditioning units. Sorry, I lost my place. So how could they mitigate that issue without proper renderings? Another example of the deceit. This should have been up to you, the commission, not Mr. Tippett, Wark, or Mr. Rogers. 6. Today we are asking you to take into account the illegal processes taking place to date. This project and our requests for notification of the neighbors for a public meeting were not performed in a timely manner. Any of the aesthetic mitigations that have been discussed are unacceptable. There is nothing you can do to make these modulars fit into our neighborhood. 7. In the staff report before you, it is stated that since 2 years ago, MCHD determined that original construction methods of on-site construction were not achievable as proposed due to the budgetary constraints and building alternatives needed to be explored. MCHD explored alternatives that would be available for construction to remain within the budget and determined that they could remain with a Type 5 wood building with sprinklers. However, it would be constructed off-site, which would say to me it's a new building. The director considered the change in building type to be a change to the conditions of the environmental document warranting further evaluation. In his statement in the newspaper dated August 29th, he said it would have to go before the commission. Also noted, there was an email from CEO Mr. Rogers, in quotes, "We have a use permit and all comments in the hearings will be limited to building type and appearance. We have already had meetings with members of ARC, planning, supervisors, and contractors to discuss numerous features just as we did for the original plan." End quote. Again, out of public view and involvement. When does he decide who can speak? Also, when we tried to verify those meetings, no notes or documentation could be provided regarding those meetings. Supervisors state they were not asked about the project. 8. Since this is a conditional use permit, any public meeting should have been held months ago before this project was jammed down our throats. From the August 29th paper, we were awaiting a commission meeting to never have it happen. I have never seen such brazen disregard of policies and procedures in place for development and building. Not only is this not a Type 5 build, but are used modular buildings that bring a whole set of maintenance and redesign issues that are fiscally irresponsible. And without an engineered set of plans and specs, how can they be allowed to bring these buildings in and start construction? The deception that is currently happening is unbelievable. They have brought these buildings in without due process completed. Just because Mr. Rogers is rushing into this without proper permitting does not mean you can't deny the project and remove these unacceptable buildings. 9. Many of the mitigation measures of 2 years ago are being overlooked. As Sonny spoke, the Norrell Moo Wintun Nation tribal organization was to be present when the first soil excavation was done. That was a mitigation. According to Tribal Chief Sonny, they were not contacted. 10. The improvement plans shall include a grading plan and erosion and sediment control plan, which incorporates standard erosion control practices and best management practices, subject to the approval of the county engineer for disturbed areas. The plan shall be prepared by a qualified SWPP developer and shall be included in an agreement with the construction contractor. This was also followed by 9 other measures, one of which was a winterization plan that was supposed to be submitted by September 15th and implemented by October 15th, none of which have been told to us have been done or could be verified by the time of this meeting. These dates have come and gone. 11, under hazards discussed 2 years ago, one of the mitigations was noise impacts, at that time found to be low level, not now. As above mentioned, no renderings were given as to the 9 heating and air conditioning units that now line Taylor Street. This is unacceptable to not only the aesthetics of the street, but to the neighbors that will now have to endure round-the-clock noise levels unaddressed. These units were built in Southern California, not the mountains, and will not be efficient for our region. Not only were those units not discussed with work, but they were not taken into consideration when the modular units were being installed recently. Again, an engineered approved set of plans would have shown the units, and WARC could have tried to mitigate the ugliness that is facing Taylor Street. This is totally unacceptable. I could go on with examples as to why this conditional use permit should be denied, but we would be here all night. 2 years has gone by now, and this project is 180 degrees from the original plan. This modular unit does not belong in our historically valued street. 2 years ago, you drafted a plan that acknowledged the historical value and crafted mitigation measures that would protect it as best as possible. At this point, we have seen and don't trust that those measures are being followed, that MCHD are being held accountable for illegal progress to an unapproved project. We feel like they pulled a bait and switch on all of us, the commission, supervisors, and the people. Who plans a project without knowing the cost? If they had budgetary constraints, then scrap the project and move on and pursue other options. With Redding Rancheria building a new clinic this spring, and many of the physicians of 2 years ago have left and are employed by Rancheria. As a matter of fact, over the last couple years, we have watched a revolving door of employees leaving MCHD. They have issues staffing the hospital and the clinic. How are they going to be able to staff a larger clinic? Why then wouldn't you look to the budget you do have and add on to the current clinic, hospital building, or use their back lot for the project? They stated they would do everything possible to keep the impacts to the historically valued Taylor Street to a minimum. We thought they truly cared, but realized they have been lying to us all with smoke and mirrors. Stop this deception and please vote to deny this permit. And if you don't deny the permit, then we would like to see it go back to the planning department for a update on the CUP. Then we need a clear set of mitigations for this project. All planning codes and regulations need to be followed. You or I have to comply or we get red tagged or fined. Where are the red tags and fines for the above lack of engineered plans, excavation measures, and bringing a building in without stamped plans and permits? As stated in the staff report, the applicant was advised against placement and was notified that it could be a risk should future actions not allowing the placement of the modular units happen. Since they have been notified of that, then we see nothing to stop you tonight from denying their permit, and they can remove the modular units and explore a building that will fit into the neighborhood as originally stated was the priority of this historically valued street. As these proceedings continue, if you have any questions or further clarifications, we would be happy to answer them. And if God forbid you allow the project to continue, We ask that we have input on the mitigation measures and would like to give you each a copy of our mitigation concerns. If you don't deny the permit, we ask it goes back to the planning for an update of the CUP amended. I would like to take time at this time to also ask my fellow appellate Lanny Rhodes to come up. She is a 25-year architectural in architectural, and she has other things that we would like to bring up at this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Corrigan. Mrs. Rhodes, since Mrs. Corrigan is actually officially the appellate, as stated, you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay, I'll speak really fast. Okay, aesthetics. Clearly, there was not enough consideration given towards context sensitivity when the choice was made to go ahead with this modular building. There is now no reactive after-the-fact fix for this building. No paint color, no retrofitted pitch roof will change it to where it's going to blend in with this residential area. And to make matters worse, the original plan, maybe we should have had it showing because it was a pretty nice looking building. But what happened with this new modular building is it was placed right on the edge of the street, Taylor Street, and it has a very tall building. It's a rectangular box. It sits very close to the road. And so basically, in short, the problem aesthetically is the entire building, its scale, its shape, and its location on the site. It's nothing like what the original architectural plans that was shown to the public. It's more overpowering, and the scale of the neighborhood just doesn't fit. So one could plant a row of trees to attempt to soften and obscure this extremely unappealing building facade, but there is no simple way of attenuating the noise of the air conditioning units that will, the amount of noise that those units will generate. And I don't know if you have seen this building, if anyone here has seen it, but basically it's a large wall that runs right along the edge of the street. There are 8 air conditioners in a row, and what they did was they oriented this building so that the back side of the building faces the street. It's extremely ugly. And so basically the property values, I think, may be affected. I'm sure the people in the neighborhood are considering that possibility. And then additionally, I think of building codes, I think of public safety. This is a public building, and I know I'm not supposed to talk about codes and all that such. But what this building is it's a used building. It's not a new building. The used buildings go under a whole different set of codes. They do not have to comply. They're treated as an existing building, so they do not have to comply with the current codes and standards. So this building that was built in, constructed in 2009, that's what you're going to get, is a 2009 building. Not a 2000, it's not based upon current codes and standards. That's one. The other is it was built for a different area, a different client, a different area. So it does not comply with the local requirements regarding seismic safety, perhaps. It does not meet the snow load requirements for this area, this zone. So the snow load requirements in this area is 40 pounds per square foot. This building was designed for 20 pounds per square foot. Yes?
It is fine.
Let her speak.
Well, and one more thing, we did
Okay.
mention that code and building code situations are not the preview of the building.
Okay, what I can't
the
understand is
preview of the
when will
planning.
that happen? Because this is a public safety concern. This building, when we're talking about aesthetics, this building has issues. They bought it, They brought it in as if it was a used car. They didn't go through proper procedures.
I
Okay.
understand. And just to make, please, just to make clear, we have read your letters too, and
Okay.
your insightful questions within, so.
Well, we wanna
We
hear
have
it.
assessed your concerns and your questions.
So, we're not talking about codes tonight?
No, this is not the preview of the planning commission to talk about building codes and safety.
Okay.
That belongs strictly to the building department, the building officials, Jim Santiago. I believe Jim Santiago has also addressed some concerns in terms of occupancy and others that was brought forward. Energy calculations, sprinklers approved by the Weaverville Fire District, et cetera. So this is, we're not here to discuss this specifically.
Okay, well, I'd like to add that as of 1 o'clock today, questions and emails that Lanny and I have had ongoing for well over a month, we're finally, we got some answers today. And one of them is we finally got to take a look at a set of plans. Right on the front of the set of plans is 20-pound snow load. So when, live load. And so when Lanny discusses safety issues, we have safety issues, which is truthfully another reason this needs to go back for a proper amended CUP. Mr. Underwood states in his letter on behalf of MCHD, and he refers to the zoning codes, zoning code F, read that there has been a material change in the orientation or location of structures on the parcel. Well, that has happened. They're located different on the parcel, and it is a structural change. So again, we've been held up. I have to say I agree with Mr. McHugh. I don't quite understand why we've gotten to where we are here today, because these channels have not been brought along. And the reason we filed our appeal, is because those modulars were brought in. They're on site, construction's happening, they're buttoning up. And how does this happen? How does this happen when there isn't a complete review and these questions aren't answered? So we're asking you to send this back. Stop the construction and send this back for a full review, because it's not too late to do that. And so, anyhow.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Corrigan.
Read this, revocation
No,
over
I'm
public
sorry,
safety.
I'm sorry. Mrs. Corrigan, you have stated your concerns. We have read multiple letters submitted by you and Mrs. Rhodes.
Okay, well, let me read one more paragraph. Revocation. Upon a determination by the planning director that the use is being conducted in a manner detrimental to the public health, safety, or general welfare, or in a manner as constitute a public nuisance, or in violation of any condition imposed upon such use as stated in the above permit, the director may revoke such permit. If the director determines that the detrimental aspects of the use which exist may be alleviated through a modification of the permit approval terms, he or she may make such modification in lieu of permit revocation.
Thank you, Mrs. Corrigan. Is there anyone else wishing to address the commission regarding this issue? Please come forward.
Several years ago, the Health and Human
Sir,
Services.
your name for the record.
Several years ago.
I'm sorry, if you're not going to state your name.
It's not required.
It's not
Oh, it's
required.
not required.
No,
There you go. Thank you. Thank you for the clarity on that, Council.
because we have this issue at the Board of Supervisors. But anyway, at the Health and Human Services put a modular building in town in the industrial park. It was under snow load, and it was removed because of that. So that's an issue that needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
Commissioners, my name is Bob Morris. I'm the current chair of the Architectural Review Committee. I've been on the committee for 32 years, been in construction for almost half a century. There's a tremendous amount of comment I could make about this project. It's not gone smoothly. but that's not what I'd like to address tonight. To Commissioners, Mr. McHugh and Mr. Matthews, in the beginning, your concerns, I think, are valid. It seems to me that, let me backtrack. Over the years I've been on the committee, several times there's been occasion where I've met with the applicants with full disclosure to the planning director and the rest of our committee to try to set up the applicants for success. In other words, to point out things that in my experience won't fly, things that possibly will fly, not making decisions, not speaking for the committee, but just having these heads-up type of meetings. In the spirit of trying to make this project successful, a small group of us have met Dwayne Herford, tremendous amount of experience in construction, the hospital's contractor, Thurston Wilson, Jerry Cousins, and myself, trying to come up with a roof mitigation that would be acceptable. That application to request Architectural Review Committee to address that has not happened yet. I don't know the reason that the hospital's not applied to have that, what I consider to be the last meeting on this subject, but it seems to me that having that, what I hope and think will be the last meeting, would give you all a better idea of what is actually being proposed. I don't see how you can act on this without knowing what the final recommendation is. So we've been tasked with this. It's unusual, it's not within the historic district, but we've been tasked with trying to mitigate the project. The original proposed stick-built building was a beautiful building. Whether or not you think it should exist in the residential area there, not the purview of our committee. We suggested siding treatments, colors, roofing, etc., all accepted. Anyway, you all know the history of how that went down, and now these modular buildings have shown up. And everything you've heard is fairly accurate in my mind tonight. We've not seen renderings. We weren't aware of these air conditioning units until just recently. But it does seem that we should do this last step and try to come up with a recommendation, and then you all meet on this. It certainly makes more sense to me. My 2 cents. Do you have any questions of me before I sit down?
Any questions for Mr. Morris, Commissioners?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jim Underwood. I am a local attorney. I represent the district. And so my goal tonight is to address some of the issues that have been discussed by the Commission, to try to respond to some of the questions that have been raised, and just provide a little more information from the district's perspective. So thanks for that opportunity. I'll start out by saying that I think the staff report properly frames the issue. The question is, I'll get into a little more detail about how the county code applies from my reading of it, but the planning director made a decision based on input from the Architectural Review Committee, which mitigation measures require. And as has been discussed, there have been several meetings. And frankly, it's been an ongoing process. But the decision that's being appealed from per the code is the planning director's decision that the changes are minor, that they're not substantial deviations from the use permit. And those are the key terms, those are the issues. In fact, the code makes really explicit the categories of substantial deviation, like increased roof heights and the like. And those just aren't present here. Now, I'm gonna kind of walk through some of the issues in more detail, but the district isn't claiming that the modulars as presented, as delivered to the site, are aesthetically pleasing. They're not intended to be the final result, and I've got some more information to share with the Commission tonight in that regard. So as most of you know, the project history is basically that the district said, hey, we want to significantly improve medical services in this community. In order to do that, in order to bring more specialized medical services to this community, we need to expand the clinic. So that started the process. As you full well know, when that happens, a proposed project comes forward. The district did that. You go through the environmental review process required by CEQA to analyze all the various impacts. Now, so all of that occurred. We have a use permit that was approved following appeal back in 2016. The appellant here, essentially said, under no conditions will the project be appropriate, and I think that's what I'm hearing tonight, but that's not really the point. The point is that there was a lengthy process, and there was a great deal of mitigation that was imposed. The most important of which is that relating to these aesthetic kinds of considerations, which the district has worked with the Architectural Review Committee on, involving roof height, involving side treatments, involving color, involving lighting. But I hope the commission will keep in mind mitigation measure I-1, the key measure here, essentially set up a meet and confer process. It isn't that the work was delegated, a final decision from which appeals could be made, but the district has appreciated the ability to work with Commissioner Matthews and the other members on that commission, and has proceeded to kind of refine concepts that can address aesthetic issues of legitimate concern. So in so proceeding, as is always the case in construction projects, you get plans, you put them out to bid, and you see what the market's going to yield. Well, the market is saying, hey, the square footage cost is way beyond what even the architect thought would be the case. You regroup. In this case, there was value engineering. Can we modify systems? Can we deal with square footage? What are all the options? The option that the district came up with, consistent with its objective of providing expanded services in a cost-effective way that fit the site, and which the district truly believed and still believes can be made aesthetically compatible in the neighborhood. It's different from the original project, but it can be made aesthetically compatible, was this prefabricated medical clinic. It was constructed for a medical clinic. And I will say that, there have been questions about building permits and so forth. The state architects signed off on it. Jim Santiago signed off on it as to snow load. It's been strengthened. There's a 40-pound snow load that's been approved. That's in the file, but that's not why we're here today.
It's in the file, Mr. Underwood.
Is it? You have that?
Well, yes, we do have your letter as well, and you have stated the same issues that you're pursuing as we speak.
So as a result of the discussions with the Architectural Review Committee, I'd like to just very briefly walk through the significant changes with some renderings, if the commission will accommodate.
Those actually could be submitted to Ruth, so we could review those with more discretion and time, if you would, please. It's difficult for you to. So I see you have several.
I can do that, and I'll just
great.
summarize this.
Just for us to have more time to review those,
That's fine.
more detail.
That's fine. I'll summarize the highlights.
Thank you.
Sure. So basically, the original plan had a footprint with 7,200 square feet. The new plan fits onto the site in a way that has increased setbacks, lower roof line, basically gives a lot of opportunity to inherently mitigate some of the impacts that have been discussed tonight and were discussed 2 years ago. The landscaping plan is originally approved, can be accommodated with the new footprint. which instead of having minimum of 10 feet setbacks from Easter Avenue and about 35 feet, I think, from Taylor, now have substantially increased setbacks. It just lends itself to improvements on the side.
Please, order. Sorry, please proceed. We have allotted Mrs. Corrigan because she's the appellant. With all due respect, I do, since you're representing the clinic, I wanted you to give me due time.
Thank you.
Please.
Appreciate that. So obviously the elevation's gone from 2-story to 1-story. And that doesn't address the concern that was discussed on a couple of occasions with the Architectural Review Committee. How do we have a roof system, to the extent feasible, given engineering realities, that deals with the aesthetics? The district's engineer determined that a full 410 pitched roof built on top of these modules couldn't be supported. It wasn't feasible. The mitigation 1-1, consistent with discussions with the Architectural Review Committee, said we're gonna try to find whatever's feasible. That wasn't. So the next best system was this sloped Manford roof. The elevations that you have deal with that and provide the last conceptual schematic design, which the district fully intends to continue to work with staff and consult with the Architectural Review Committee as would be desired and helpful to refine all of that. It also deals with horizontal wall solutions, to soften that. It deals with, and the district's intending to put in the kinds of features that typically go over doorways that will soften the roof line. It wants to have a great look to the extent feasible, and that's the intention. And so what's been presented to you to take a look at is consistent with that. So again, the primary issue is whether or not the commission believes that the planning director's decision that these represent minor changes is proper. If you disagree, I believe you need to make findings that say things such as the roof line dramatically changed, or make findings consistent with one of the other specific criteria that we just don't think apply in this case. The district wants to continue to work with the county, with the Architectural Review Committee, the Historic Society, but under no facts that have been presented is there a substantial deviation from the use permit. And that's the key to this body's ability to modify the use permit. So the focus is properly on aesthetics. We want to get it right. We will get it right, working with county staff and otherwise toward that end. Let me address a couple of erroneous statements tonight. First of all, even the document that you have before you, and I think it's in condition V-2, page 43 of the mitigation plan, it deals with cultural resources, and it says that the county reached out to tribal leaders for that purpose, and there was no response. To our knowledge, there hasn't been any response at all until tonight. But that said, the contractor's been sensitive to, anything on site that might look to be of concern, and that's what good contractors do. There is nothing that's come to light of concern. The issue of the snow load, that's a building permit issue, but it has been addressed. That's a misconception. The noise issue, the HVAC units, as shown on the schematics, are built-in, self-contained units for each module. We have specs that I think have been submitted, but if not, they can be, that make clear that within 10 feet of each unit, the noise level is something like 72 decibels. Ambient noise is 60. If you get out to the sidewalk or the street on Taylor, the noise level is less than ambient. It's almost indiscernible. So the specs for those units make that clear. That's not an issue.
In Sacramento, they request that it's 55.
Sir, please. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Time to comment. I'm sorry, thank you.
And you know, with regard to the building, like I said, the state has approved it. Jim Santiago, the building department has reviewed and signed off on it. It was actually manufactured in 2012. And then it, you know, was brought to the site, and it's an assembly process. It's not unsafe. It would be a good, safe, functional medical clinic that will expand services to the citizens of Trinity County. And that's the district's commitment, and they're going to do it in an aesthetically acceptable way. So I would be glad to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Underwood?
No, I'd like to see the diagram at some point.
Absolutely. I guess, thank you, Mr. Underwood.
Thank you.
Is there any further public comment on this agenda item?
I didn't use my full 3 minutes earlier, can I?
No, I'm sorry, we're one time only.
Hi, my name is Tracy Jackson. I'm one of the PAs that work at the clinic with Mountain Community. And I just wanted to address the commissioners and just let you know that I recently came and started working here about a year ago and then came full-time in July. And I've really enjoyed this community and working for the hospital. And I have worked for other hospitals. I've been a PA for 18 years, and I think, you know, that Mr. Rogers does the best he can, and it's good to come and work for somebody that has integrity, that really does look out for the community and the employees, and not just looking for the bottom line. And that was one of the reasons why I came here. The other reason is, you know, we have a beautiful county and town here. And we're quite busy at our clinic. We've got now 4 full-time mid-levels, PAs, and nurse practitioners, and then the 3 doctors that we work with. And we're all permanent now. We won't have any more of a rotating through docs. So I think that we'll be able to provide really good health care here, as we already have been. And you know, there's a lot of opportunities to serve the community here by working through the hospital and the clinics. The conditions that we have now are very tight. You know, sometimes it's hard for people to get their wheelchairs around into the doors, into the rooms, and they can, because it's, you know, up to code, but it's sometimes very tight with the bigger wheelchairs. And the new modular building definitely is a lot bigger and a lot more space, and will definitely be able to provide more room for us to work and provide good health care, as well as hopefully being able to use the space that we have already for some specialized medical care to come in. And I know that with working with the different communities that we'll be able to, or committees, that we'll be able to work out something for the aesthetics, because that's always been in the plan. So hopefully we get all this worked out. Thank you.
Mrs. Jackson.
I wanted to also submit these mitigation measures.
Please there any other comments from the public?
Oh, my name is Jeffrey Manning. I just recently retired up to this area, although my family's been here for over 60 years. I just wanted, what this meeting looks like it's turned out to be is more of an aesthetics issue and on those rules and things along that nature. And we've already, and as stated, there's already a conditional use permit. I think the aesthetics issue is a valid one, and I think those are things that can be worked out. I think in this community, as myself, I've had 8 heart surgeries, 3 stomachs, and a bunch of other problems. There is a definite need for specialized care in this community. You cannot get that specialized need if we don't expand the clinic a little bit so that they can draw in neurologists, psychologists, cardiologists, things of that nature to this building. In the space that they're in now, they have no room for lunch. The staff has no room for lunch. They in the winter, they sit outside and eat. They have to eat, or if they eat, they're at a desk. So your retention, if there's been issues on retention of your staff, if you have a good staff that has a good place to eat their lunch, then that makes them want to stay. If you have doctors that have their office, like my specialist, that I have to go down to San Jose right now to see and come up here because there are no specialists in this county. And I can't drive myself because of my medical conditions. I can't drive to Redding. There's an elderly population in this county that cannot do the same. And in a matter of time, though they may be able to go down to Redding now, there's going to be a matter of time where they will not be able to go down to Redding. With no medical specialists here in this area, what are they going to do? Right now, I'm taking $1,000 flights down to San Jose just to see my neurologist, my cardiologist, my pulmonologist, because there are none up here. With the expansion, and the aesthetics issues can be solved. I see they're willing to work with you guys on the aesthetics issues and get those problems solved, and that's fine. It looks like it's moving forward, although you haven't heard anything on the meetings. I'm sorry, Mr. Matthews, first time I've met you. Those things can be solved and moved along. But the problem is you need to be able to have these services for the people up here in this community. Because pretty soon the older people, or the people, I guess I'm older too, but the people that can't get these services up here are not going to be able to get these services and are going to have to make the choice to move out of the area. So these are the things that I want to see addressed, that doctors needing room to actually do their work, just like I have seen in my other areas that I've lived down in San Jose. I retired, just one more thing. I retired to this, my family's been up here since late 1950s. I retired to this area this last year because I love this community. This is where I wanted to be. And I think there's a real need to serve the people of the community, to give good patient care that is needed for the people of this community. And I thank you for the few extra seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Manning.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank everybody for coming and participating. I'm Dwayne Hereford. I've lived here since 1950. I've been a builder developer since 1963. I've been involved in a few projects around town and various parts of the county. And I've tried to offer some advice and work with the hospital district and with the various people. I happen to own maybe 4 or 5 parcels in direct relationship to the clinic. I own a med dental building complex. I own a couple houses on Court Street I bought a few months ago. I believe in Trinity County. I invest all my whatever in Trinity County. And the way this thing's been presented and the way legally they went through, and I can agree with a couple of the members here tonight, it's probably not the way I would have done it, but I think we need to forge ahead. I think legally we're meeting the letter of the law. If we comply and go ahead and deny the appeal and try to get this project moving. Otherwise, Susan will have a lot of mud in the front yard. And I happen to own the building across from her property, and I own a vacant lot I own there to the hospital ever since I bought it, so there's a parking place. I've got 4 kids, they were all born here, one of them was a miracle baby. I totally advocate good health care and encouraging good practitioners. So I recommend, and the way I read all the stuff, the board can approve what Rick Tippett wants to do. And I think you can legally deny the appeal. I don't object to people appealing. None of them have ever talked to me about it. Of course, maybe they know my feeling. Anyway, you got any questions, I'll try to answer them. I'll sit down and shut up. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Herford.
I'm Chris Parkin. Moved to Weaverville in 1950, and I live just up the road. In fact, I live above the hospital on Easter Avenue. Couple things. I mean, it's I only have 3 minutes, but the sound issues with those air conditioning units. When the current hospital air conditioning units kick in, we can hear them at our house. We're probably, I'd say, a good 1/8 of a mile away. It's not really an inconvenience, but you know, you can hear it, and it's a buzz. I think that when you use a B, for example, one air conditioning unit is one that would set 60 decibels out at the street. If you have one bee, you can barely hear it, but when you get a swarm of bees, it becomes a loud drone. And the architectural review, personally, there doesn't seem to be any stopping this project. And so, if I were Aaron Rodgers, why do we even need the architectural review board? Because he's already done it. And if he doesn't put up landscaping, doesn't put up a sound barrier wall, then what are you going to do about it? He's already got the building in place, and he's got doctors moving in, and he doesn't even have to make it look aesthetically pleasing to the neighborhood. It's a square box, and you cannot, I mean, you take a look at the original drawings. It was shaped like a cross, and it was attached to the current 3,400 square foot building. The building, when you take a look at where that building currently sits, it sits like right at the setback. It's 35 feet from the building to the sidewalk. Now, the plans weren't made available to us, the site plans weren't made available to us until tonight, and there wasn't even a plot plan. So we can't even see how far back the old plans were. And judging from those plans and overlaying where the current building is on that map that you have, I judge that it's set back 20 feet further than the current building. So where the current building is now, you go back 20 feet because it's attached to the current clinic, the 3,400 square foot building. So it's pushed back. So when you get this, and as Tippett, not Tippett, but as Roger said in his earlier meeting, quoted in the Trinity Journal, he was going to have a stair-stepped approach or visually from Taylor Street looking at the clinic. It was going to be two-story, but it was going to be pushed back 20 feet further. So it would appear to be lower.
Last comment, Mr. Parkin.
And now it's moved up 20 feet closer, and it's more like looking up at a cliff. Mr. Underwood spoke past his 3 minutes, so.
Nonetheless, he's representing the clinic, which is a consideration, but everyone else has spoken 3 minutes, so I appreciate your comments. Thank you, Mr. Parkin.
It seemed like it's such an important thing that you get more than 3 minutes to state your opinion.
There are lots of opinions to be stated, so we're being conscious
No,
of
could I have somebody
everyone's
else's 3
time
minutes?
as well. Is there anyone else who wants to comment? Please come forward.
Hi, so my name is Carrie Kennedy, and I live directly across the street from where the project is. A couple of my concerns are, well, I have a few of them. The day that the trailers moved in was the day I had to write my hospital tax check, and I gotta tell you, that really hurt, because I had no idea what was being parked, and there it was. I don't know if you've all seen it. If you haven't, I have some pictures on my computer of the project from my view, from my house. It's pretty shocking, actually. Currently, I'm concerned about the noise. I'm concerned about all the air conditioning units running all at once. Also, the generators, when the air conditionings fail. And the sound of the generators at the hospital right now is quite loud for us who live that close. When they do kick in, the lighting at the hospital right now, there's one light there that has been, I don't know, I just think of the film Psycho, because it just flickers and it's never been repaired. My daughter, when she was younger, asked me if a monster lived there because it was really super scary to her. And it just brings in my mind, what's the light going to be like there? That's directly from me to you, basically. My living room window and then my bedroom window right next to it. So I do have concerns about what the lighting plan is and what the noise effect is going to be of those units facing the street. I'm not sure why they didn't face the hospital, and maybe the noise would be deflected to non-residents rather than to the residents. So yeah, if the project goes through, I think it needs a lot of work. I also think in light of the fact that Reading Rancheria is coming in and putting in a facility, maybe we just need to pause and figure out, is this the best way to spend our money? What are they bringing to our community? How can we partner up? And maybe we don't need to, I don't know about if your hospital can't run unless you have a clinic and how big that clinic needs to be to get, or if it's just a matter of attracting quality healthcare people here. But maybe in light of the way this whole thing's gone down, we just need to take a moment and see, is this really the best decision for our community? How many big clinics do we need? I don't know that much about that other than what I read in the paper, but a $9 million clinic going in our community, it seems like it might be enough. Maybe we would rethink it and use some of that space and some of that money to make improvements on the hospital if they can make any more. I don't know. Anyway, thank you.
Mrs. Scott.
Hi, my name is Mary Cole, and I'm the manager of the Trinity Clinic and the Hafer Community Health Clinic. And I just want to address the comment that was made about Reading Rancheria here. Reading Rancheria has been here for a year, and we lost 2 providers to them. We didn't lose all of our providers. And as Tracy said, we now have 5 full-time providers, including 1 doctor and 2 contracted doctors. But in Weaverville, we have 3 gas stations, and we have 2 hardware stores, and we have 2 pharmacies right across the street from each other. And I can't imagine us asking any one of them to close because we only need one pharmacy, or we only need one gas station, or we only need one hardware store. Healthcare to me is my passion. And yesterday, just in our little small clinic, we saw 65 patients. 65 patients in one day, and Redding Rancheria is up on Highway 3. I am glad that they're opening their clinic. It's not about competition. It's about truly giving the people of Trinity County what they really need. And that is as many providers as we can get up here. 2 of our providers have actually made huge commitments to this county. One has Tracy bought a house up on Easter Avenue. Heidi, who's not here this evening, bought a house out in Lewiston. And we have Jared here. And so it's not a matter of Rancheria building they have the money to, it's federally funded, to build a 16 million. We're building what we can, but the reason that we're building this clinic is to give just more providers and more choices to the people of Trinity County.
Thank you, Mrs. Cole.
Ann Duckett. I've lived in the county for 28 years now, and I've worked for the hospital, and I hope my services were appreciated as a nurse. I also used the ER, and I used the clinic, and I found the people to be wonderful. And I totally missed the part in my contract when I bought my property that the neighborhood would never change. And there are things that go on in my neighborhood that I never anticipated when I moved there. But I also know that life moves on and things change. And if you really hate the way your neighborhood looks, there are options that you can use that can allow people to have, their life the way they want it to. So I think both sides need to take a look at this and really try to come to an agreement that can meet the needs of the whole community, not just one small portion of it. And I think Trinity County is great, and I love the people in it.
Thank you. Any further comments? Being that there's none, we will close public comment, bring it back to the commission. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. I do have a question for staff. One point that Mrs. Corrigan brought up was that there was no approved set of engineer plans prior to the placement of the modulars. Mrs. Hubbard, is that correct? Or how did that proceed? Because I assume the original intent and the plans drawn from Jack Freeman, the architect of Eureka, was presented, but prior to the placement of the modulars, was there any revised engineered plans or anything submitted to indicate these changes?
Plans were submitted. I'm not sure what date they were. That was something that I deferred to Jim Santiago, our building official.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Could we get some explanation of what?
Yes, yes, that would be great. I assume this explanation would come from Mr. Underwood since he submitted the drawings. Mr. Underwood, I believe, thank you for coming forward.
Yes, sure.
Commissioner McKee, you want to voice your question?
Mr. Underwood, do you have more copies of the?
Yes. looks like the first 3 pages are the original plan. There's a site plan, a landscape plan, and an elevation. And that's the original.
That's correct. The intention was to provide those for background to show contrast on cited elevation issues.
Thank you. So the next page, the master site plan, the orange square, is that the present location of the modular?
That's correct. So it shows, in contrast to the original footprint, how in fact it's significantly set back from Easter Avenue, approximately the same from Taylor.
Okay. The next drawing, pencil drawing of an elevation is facing south. That is to the neighboring parcel.
Yes, and this was just intended to make known, as we all have to accept, it doesn't look very appealing as it was delivered to the site.
Okay.
To contrast that with the proposed solutions on roof siding and additional landscaping.
Okay, the next elevation, I'm looking at this one now.
Yes, Taylor Street.
That's the Taylor Street one. Those boxes are the air conditioning units in question.
Yes, they're the white rectangulars are windows. The built-in HVAC units are the kind of gray rectangles as well.
Okay, and that's a brick treatment, or what is that?
I'm sorry?
Is that foundation? Is that what that is to the right, lower portion of that elevation?
Yes, so basically what's proposed, and I think this is what is intended, is that the lower third of the sides would be 12-inch horizontal hardy board. Above that, the upper 2/3 would be 3-foot vertical hardy board with 16-inch bats to help with the aesthetics. In a way, very similar, I understand, to the existing clinic building.
Okay, thank you. And the next one shows an overhang on the roof. Is this?
Yeah, so that's an illustration of the proposed Mansford roof overhang system. The only thing that this doesn't fully incorporate are proposed gables, such as that shown on the Taylor Street illustration, that can easily be added to this Mansford roof system to help with breaking up that length and just giving a little more depth. I guess architects say articulation, but make it a little more aesthetically pleasing. And that is feasible. That's not an engineering structural problem. That can be done.
All right, and the final elevation shows a different roof treatment, or the angle makes it difficult to see the overhang. I'm not sure when.
I might have to get help on that from one of the district people, but the intention is, what is the overhang distance?
I'd have to see it.
You want to come up and answer that question? If you can?
This is.
Which one is it?
So is there a distinction between those two in terms of overhang?
I think it was just designed trying to, before give it to the architectural committee, and the different color roofs, so it pretty much are all the same roof, and just trying to, I think just his computer showed it like that, but it's either doing some posts and just a different design.
What's the depth of the overhang?
It would be, I think on this one, it would go up about 48 inches above the peak of the roof. The roof on the clinic is about less than a 1 in 12 pitch, so it's almost flat. So it'd be right at the 60-foot, it'd be going up about a foot and then even all the way around.
But this shows a significant overhang.
Yeah, that was just a design there with the guy that drew this. So it's, I mean, if the architectural committee liked that design, it was something that could be done.
Okay.
So there can be greater or lesser overhang, but those are all consistent with kind of this Mansford roof concept that really changes the appearance together with the siding, and as you'll see in comparing the site plan, you know, the landscape plan, it won't be intruded upon at all. It can, certainly on Easter Avenue and to some degree on Taylor, it can be enhanced as well to deal with what we think are nominal additional potential noise sources and visual impacts. So those are the aesthetic treatments that the district would like to have more feedback, discussion with the architecture review folks, you know, and come up with the final plan. We think it's solvable. And these are illustrations to show that's the case in comparison to the original elevations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from Mr. Underwood? Commissioners?
I don't really think this orange rectangle is set in the correct location. I mean, I was there yesterday walking around, and it certainly doesn't appear to me that it's set back. If that original setback from Taylor Street is 35 feet, and then as Mr. Parkin mentioned, there's at least another 20 feet back to the original proposed building. So this would be saying it's 50 feet back from the street?
From the center of the road.
Center line?
From the center,
Yeah, that's where the
road.
county goes, from the center of the road. We measured it maybe 48 feet, and the county measures from the center of the road, so that's what the measurements were.
And 35 from center line on Easter Avenue.
And, yeah.
In contrast to the 10-foot setback under the original plan on Easter Avenue. So there's increased setback.
What was the original on?
Yeah, it's closer to the road now. 10 feet. It is close to the road.
Go on, Taylor.
There's a thing that, I think it was less than,
I know it said approximately, but I didn't know if that was a few more.
I measured tonight, and it's 35 feet from the existing building to the sidewalk. There's a black walnut tree there, and that's 35 feet to the sidewalk. I measured it tonight. 20 feet on the other side from the current building to the existing, or from the current building to the new building.
So 35 to the sidewalk plus the additional distance of the center line is basically what we're talking about, yes. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr.
I don't know if it would help for you guys to be able to have a picture look at. Here's some prison, here's a porch. I will show you how close it is. See how close it is to the sidewalk?
I believe the commissioners have seen the site. Thank you.
Now, back to my opening comment.
Yes, please.
I'm inclined to favor a scenario that says we let the architecture committee and the district finish their work and then come back with a final plan. I don't know if that means we continue to decide at such point, or, because I'm not sure whether that leads to upholding the decision of the director or upholding the appeal. But I feel like it's a work in progress. The district is asked to complete the work of the architecture committee, and until that work is done, I'm not sure what the director approved is a complete thing yet. So I'm still in that state where I feel like it's in limbo, and we're being asked to make the final call on that. That's my impression.
I agree with that. I also agree with some of the testimony we've heard tonight that, under paragraph or under section F, I think Director Tippett failed to consider the significance of the changes in the project. I think there was a material change in the orientation and location of the structure. That's one of the 6 conditions here. So that makes me uncomfortable, I guess. And I'm certainly concerned for the residents there. I think noise, to me, is an issue that wasn't addressed. Certainly, the original use permit and the original structure did not have 9 air conditioning units facing Taylor Street. It would have made noise in other ways, but they probably would have had heat pumps somewhere sited somewhere differently in the center of the parcel, which probably would have reduced the noise significantly. So I definitely have these concerns, and I haven't quite made up my mind what the appropriate action is right yet. But I think it's going to be pretty difficult to make these modular buildings not a nuisance in the community. But it can definitely make them look better. I mean, we heard lipstick on the pig. Is that an acceptable level of mitigation? I don't know. Not for me, probably, but.
This is missing the power box that they installed today too, that was set out in front of this building.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's the back side of the building.
Please, order, folks. Thank you. Mr. Fraser, any comments?
I'm still having difficulty with what exactly we're being asked to uphold myself. To me, it seems like we're being asked to uphold our own mitigation measures, but there's, at that point, if we say that yes, that it seems to me that we're being asked if Director Tippett had good reason to allow the modulars, saying that it would be mitigated by an already existing mitigation measure. And do we think that that mitigation measure is going to be sufficient? So I'm having a hard time. It's not a very good mitigation measure. They leaves too much open to interpretation, and it's difficult to know what we're getting in the end. So it is difficult to make a decision when it says that it's recommended that they meet with the Architectural Review Committee. They've already met that mitigation. They've met with the Architectural Review Committee. It doesn't say in that mitigation measure whether or not they have to implement the suggestions of the Architectural Review Committee. So that's where the rub is for me. Is do we want to lean on that mitigation measure? It's pretty weak.
Yeah, I think the concern that I have is that mitigation measure was for the original use permit, which was a stick-built, attractive, large building that was somewhat out of scale for the community, for the neighborhood, but because it was the way it was designed and with its roof lines and complexity, you know, it was a very attractive building. And so that mitigation measure would have basically have had, talking about color or something trivial. I mean, that's basically what it was, is they were gonna say, well, we've got this, designed this wonderful building, it's really attractive, what do we need to mitigate? And we probably would have said, oh, gee, looks good to us, you know? So, but now it's, the mitigation is the most important part of the project, really, to try to make this eyesore somehow fit into the neighborhood. And I agree with you that there's no specificity in it, no requirement in it, and that is worrisome. So, I mean, that would be a reason to argue that we should request staff to revisit the use permit and potentially evaluate noise and evaluate different mitigation measures that require more effective treatment. We obviously heard testimony that many people believe it's impossible to mitigate this rectangular structure aesthetically. You know, probably the only real way to do it would be to completely hide it with vegetation screening. You know, some sort of fencing and, you know, a lot of trees and basically try to make it disappear. But anyway, so I guess I agree with you, Dan.
I'm not sure if I agree with you yet. I don't know what, this is
I went a little further than you.
This is hard to, it's a hard one because it, we don't know what we're deciding. I think if we deny the appeal, basically we're accepting project as is, reading these mitigation measures, because they've already met all the mitigation measures. So we would be, depending on the goodwill of Mountain Community Health Care District.
Well, so my approach to that is still debating in my head whether this is a significant change. I believe that if the committee, the Architectural Review Committee, reviewed this in conjunction with the district and came up with a set of modifications and came back, then we would have the ability to look at a modified use permit that makes those get implemented. And not simply have a recommendation to have a meeting as a mitigation.
I would agree with the rest of the commission. I believe the use permit needs to be revisited. There's issues with noise, as has been brought up. I have seen this site myself. We don't have information. I don't believe staff has information either of the model of these HVAC units, how loud these decibels are, and as the B comment, in conjunction of multiple units going off at once. Also, the landscaping plan that's provided, I mean, that's for the original design. Obviously, there's to cover most of this building or to mitigate some of these aesthetics, the landscaping design will completely have to be revisited. I believe that would be something to modify, that would constitute a modification of the use permit. Also, as stated by all the commissioners, mitigation measures says meet and if justified, or is the specific language of this mitigation. Basically, it does not pose any obligation on the healthcare district to actually impose these or go forward with the recommendations. So these are gray areas that leaves much to be desired, I guess, or much needed conclusion or structure, I guess, is the word. I don't know. So. How do we proceed at this point? I mean, I know that our task here tonight is to either approve what the planning director's decision or approve or uphold the appellate's decision. But I don't know if either of those are a proper channel to address what is going on with so many uncertain questions. Council, please help.
So I think they're two separate things. I think, first of all, the question of whether it's a significant change. If you make a finding that it's a significant change that requires an amendment to the CUP, then you really don't need to go back to the question of revisiting the architectural and mitigations in that sense. Because if you've made a finding that it's a significant change, then that requires amendment of the CUP. If you find that it's not a significant change requiring amendment to the CUP, then I think your continuance for more information would be appropriate.
Thank you, Council.
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, I will provide, just for the record, the specs on the HVAC system that shows the noise.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood.
counts.
No, with the full load.
Full load.
All 9 units operating simultaneously. Yes.
So Council, I do have a question. So if the commission believes that it's a significant change, what does that entail? Is that a new environmental review? Is it something that staff can take and modify the conditional use permit?
It most likely would be a modification of the conditional use permit to take into account the significant change that you've identified, and if other required mitigations are necessary, then staff would make those recommendations and it would come back before you.
Well, I'll try it. My earlier comment was, I'll make a motion to continue this item. And then come back to us after the final meeting, as Mr. Morris referenced, between the architectural committee and the district, to give the committee all the data, all the diagrams, all the noise, and look at that to make a complete set of recommendations back to the district. And we'll continue that. At the continued meeting, we'll revisit the same thing. If the director still is upholding, if the appeal is still in place, we rule on that.
Can we address noise currently without finding that the CUP needs to be revisited, Council?
Well, so what you're asking, I believe, is for this to go back to the architectural committee, which would not, for all practical purposes, be the body that would address decibel levels. However, decibel levels are controlled by code. So if there's a violation of code on that, that issue would have to be addressed. Whether that's something that has been addressed by staff, I'm not aware.
If the general plan code specifies the decibel levels, and I don't know if this complies, but it would have to be brought into compliance as a code issue.
Correct.
I was just commenting on the fact that you also included
Well,
noise as part of your motion, and I wasn't sure whether we could really
There's
conjoin those two.
There's a reference to noise in the ST zoning, which is the special treatment area zoning, which is the architectural reviews purview. So I think you could look at noise and say, a large increase of noise is not consistent with the historical district, or it's not in the district, but with the historical treatment. I think it's within your purview to make that statement. Raise the issue, if you were to see that as an issue.
Mr. Chair?
These are the architectural committee.
There's currently no specs within the architectural review ordinance dealing with noise. FYI.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus.
We've never dealt with that before.
Well, I think in the interest of having more complete information available before we make a decision, I'll second Commissioner McHugh's motion.
There's a second for presented motion for continuance, pending on having all the pertinent information. Further discussion, commissioners, on this motion or anything else?
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Can we repeat that back?
That's what I was gonna say, can we?
Let's make sure.
Ruth, could you read that?
We want to continue this until after the final meeting between the ward and the district. And then any recommendations that work comes up with, they'll present those to the district. And then recommend that a continued meeting, we can revisit the appeal and it's still in place.
We don't have to.
That's the motion presented.
Two things. Number one, the appeal could be withdrawn. So if the appeal was withdrawn based on the architectural changes, it could be gone at that time. I would ask on the motion, just to clarify that the motion be for a continuance for further information to be provided by the Weaverville Architectural Commission. If we add into the motion the discussion back and forth, I think it will be an unclear motion.
Fair enough. And does the Architectural Commission and the district happen to think they can pick a date by which we could do this, which would make noticing a little easier? What do you think, Ruth? Is it better to pick a date?
I would just say the district, as I indicated earlier, is going to meet
I'm
anytime.
sorry, you have not been called. I apologize. No
Sure.
disrespect,
But we're available anytime.
Thank you.
Is it true that if we don't put a date in this motion, that it has to be renoticed? So it would be advantageous to pick a date if we feel that, if staff feels that that's doable. And I would add that to the motion if staff recommends a date. Otherwise,
You know, the primary issue for the Architectural Review Committee all along is having inadequate information presented to it. We've gotten piecemeal stuff, we've gotten sketches. This is by far the most detailed, but these don't necessarily agree with each other. I wouldn't say it's an actual design, it's a concept. So, you know, it's really up to the applicant to provide complete plans that the Architectural Review Committee can review at it. So it's sort of at their, when they can provide that information. What would be an acceptable level of information? What we've had in the past has been completely unacceptable in my view.
are you lobbying for don't pick a date?
Well, I'm just saying, I don't know how we would pick a date. I mean, we can go down this road again, and if the Architectural Review Committee doesn't get appropriate information, we spin our wheels and feel uncomfortable and feel we're being railroaded into making a decision or make a recommendation that turned out to be unfeasible, which seems counterproductive. So I'm not sure how we do that.
If we do put the date on it, and then put the ball into the district court, and they have to get the architecture's own review committee and things done, and they don't have their stuff together by the date that we set at that point, then we have to determine whether it's a significant change without their information.
So our regular meeting in December, is
That's 4 weeks. Is that adequate? Or not adequate?
As long as you provide. You might have to read it.
And does the project continue in the meantime?
Sorry, Mrs. Corrigan.
Please. You want that big date?
no.
You know what, my concern with all this is, as Mr. Morris stated, that noise levels has never been addressed or has never been a preview of the Architectural Review Commission. And I'm really concerned about Mr. Matthews' comments as well, that very little information has come forward and has been piecemeal. I have a problem, and I really don't want to put the Architectural Review Commission in the position of having to meet again and just try to come up with some solution. I am leaning towards declaring this a significant change and allowing a modification to the use permit. This does not mean that the approval is being denied. It just gives more leverage to the planning department to address more issues and dig deeper into the noise concerns, the landscape redesign to mitigate some of these aesthetic issues, and truthfully, anything else that may possibly come forward from a deeper look at this change in original project to what is being proposed now. I do favor a significant change, so so it gives the staff a better opportunity to review these more in detail. And then once that's presented, then the Architectural Review Committee can go back, meet with the healthcare district and with a little more leverage have, be able to come up with more feasible solutions or basically, that's.
You should hand the gavel to Commissioner Frazier and make a motion, competing motion. Based on your, ask council, I thought that was the protocol.
There's no technical requirement that, generally you should wait to make a motion until after all the other commissioners have had the opportunity. And then you can make your motion.
So, your motion,
Which I'll amend to say in regular meeting in December.
So November 13th.
I'll second that amended motion.
Commissioners, any further comments on these? I make a competing motion to determine that the project is going through significant changes, and to this will allow staff to modify the use permit. Is that sufficient?
Do we need findings?
He's making a finding that, as opposed to the director's finding that it was not a significant change which required an amendment to the use permit, he's made the finding in his motion that it is significant.
Without providing any details of what those significant, I'm just curious at this point whether, well, it seems like this 32F spells out 6 different conditions that would require
It probably would be best if the motion triggered one of those items.
Well, without having to also in section 32G, paragraph 3 says planning commission may revoke or modify use permit on a determination by the planning commission that the use is being conducted in a manner detrimental to public health, safety, welfare, or in a manner as to constitute a public nuisance, or in violation of any condition imposed by the planning commission. So does that mean I still have to?
If you make one of those findings, that would be.
Okay, well, based on the diagram presented, the project overview master plan of the location of the building and location to the original, I believe that is a material change in orientation or location of the structure, especially presenting the proximity to the setback line.
Okay, so then you could amend your motion to state that you find that the relocation of the building is a substantial change requiring amendment of the conditional use permit.
Okay, I will amend my motion to state that the relocation of the building constitutes a significant change in the change in orientation and location of the structure to constitute a significant change.
Sufficient.
second that.
Any further discussion, commissioners?
I think it warrants discussion whether we want to revisit the whole of the use permit, or if we want to see if the architectural review committee and the district can work things out aesthetically. If that, is the aesthetics the main concern here, or is it actually the change to the building that's the main concern? I guess would be my question, which one of these motions we should go with.
Well, personally, I'm introducing the change of the orientation of the building because it gives me a finding. But truthfully, my intent is to give more leverage to the building, to the planning department, to look at other issues other than just the orientation or the aesthetics. For example, as the noise, as we indicated. And for example, give a little more leverage so to work more with the healthcare district and the landscaping plans and just other mitigation measures. So my main concern is not the orientation of the building, but it's to give the planning department a little more leverage to address other issues that have been brought up by the public. So that is the intent. I believe we vote on the last motion presented.
Last motion first.
Yes, last motion first. Those in favor of the last motion presented, which is to constitute that the project is going through a significant change, et cetera, without me having to repeat the whole motion. Those in favor of this motion presented? Aye. Those opposed?
No.
No.
Motion dies because of a tie. Next, moving on to the next motion presented by Commissioner McHugh, second by Commissioner Matthews, to set a date and allow the Architectural Review Commission to meet with the healthcare district. Those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Aye. Motion carries 3-1. Next item on the agenda, matters from the commission.
Thanks for coming.
We'll wait. One minor item.
No, we're not waiting.
We're waiting for the noise to die down so we can.
Go ahead. Oh, thank you. You've been probably on your feet all day.
I think I'll leave.
Moving on to agenda item number 5, matters from the commission.
I do have one item that I'd like to discuss. I know I talked to Leslie on the phone when she told me this meeting was coming up, and with the explanation of why we weren't going to take on the owner-occupied rural dwelling thing this meeting. My concern was after the commission had asked staff to put it on the agenda. I'd already told a lot of people in my area that it was going to be on the agenda. And it wasn't that pleasant to go back then and tell them, no, it's not. And so what I would suggest, something like that in the future, put it on the agenda. Ask us to continue it. At least then we get the noticing out of the way. We can continue it to a date certain, and it's in the works, rather than me having to go tell people we kicked the can down the road again, and then the public feedback I got was not pleasant.
in light of what Commissioner Frazier is saying, was there notice for Class K in the newspaper? Because I looked through everything and I did not see it.
Well, it was told before.
So it was-
They made the decision on the agenda
Okay,
before
so,
they noticed it.
Leslie, you're saying that it's gonna be presented on the November 29th meeting? Is that-
That's gonna be the next item. She's gonna talk about schedules.
Yeah, if you want me to.
Anything else, Commissioners? Schedules?
Here.
Mr. McHugh is not here on the
Well,
Okay.
haven't heard this meeting on 29th.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6, matters from staff.
Okay, so looking at adding another meeting here in November 29th. Commissioner McHugh, you're going to be out.
Right.
Is anybody else going to be?
Present.
Okay. And
We're always here.
Commissioner Matthews, you tend to leave during the holidays. Do you know about when you're going to be gone this year in December?
Unfortunately, we're not going to tropical climates for Christmas and New Year's, so I will be gone.
I'm sorry.
basically- Yeah, I'm sorry too. I'll be gone from Christmas through New Year's, or maybe a couple days after New Year's, but otherwise, so no meetings at the end of December, but I could meet anywhere up until 20th.
Okay, so November 29th could
It's
could
fine
work.
with me.
Okay.
In light of that, I think I will be going to the tropics. So I will not be here on December 27th.
Okay, we agree on that.
Well,
No meeting.
Snowed in, so have fun.
Okay, that's it.
Okay, it is 8:09:11, meeting is adjourned.